Hello there, welcome to another lesson, and in today's lesson we're going to be talking about timing. Now, I teach quite a lot of private students, and one of the biggest problems I see is people who struggle to stay in time and struggle to keep a steady beat. Even some quite advanced students who can do a lot of fancy stuff technically still might struggle to play with a nice groove, and that's a big problem because unless you can play in a groovy kind of manner, then everything you do isn't going to be that nice to listen to. So I just want to look at a couple of ways that you might improve your timing, and I want to stress that this is a really important lesson. Even though we're not really going to be learning anything new in terms of chords or songs, I'm going to introduce a couple of really important concepts, so pay attention to this one. I want to divide this lesson up into two different parts. In the first part we're going to be looking at tapping your foot, and in the second part I want to talk about using a metronome. So let's get started. Whenever you see a really good musician playing and they've got a good feel and a good sense of time, you'll notice that they'll be physically connected to the music in some way. So they'll probably be nodding their head, or they'll be dancing, or they'll be tapping their foot. And it's this idea of tapping your foot that I want you to get used to today. Now, I've deliberately left it until a bit later on in this course to introduce this idea, just because I think at the very beginning you've probably got enough to worry about just physically playing the chords and changing between them. But if you come with me this far in the course, I think now would be a good time to get into this habit, and I promise you it will work wonders for your time feel. So let's have a go. I just want to get the camera into a position so you can see my strumming hand and my foot tapping at the same time. Here we have a lovely shot of my Manky trainers, so let's get foot tapping. And the first thing I would say is that we're going to be tapping our foot on the beat. That is on the 1, 2, 3 and 4. We're not going to be tapping on any of the in-between subdivisions of the beats, on the ands, just on the beat. And I think a good place to start would be to go back over some of our strumming patterns that we looked at in an earlier lesson, but to try them with the added foot tap. So I'm going to hold down an E chord, and if you remember, the first strumming pattern we looked at was very simple, just 4 down strums per bar, but I'm going to do that with the foot tap. And let's start off, we'll just establish a steady beat like that, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then try strumming along, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you want to get your foot tap and your strumming hand exactly in sync with one another. So as your foot hits the ground, your pick is going to be hitting the strings on the guitar. It wants to be exactly synchronized. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Might take some practice, but you should be able to feel when that is right. What you want to avoid is where that kind of thing where your foot tap is ahead or behind of your right hand. Once that feels good, we could move on to our next strum, which I think was the down, down, up, down, down strum. With the foot tap, that would sound like this. 1, 2 and 3, 4. 1, 2 and 3, 4. 1, 2 and 3, 4. Notice the foot tap is in exactly the same place. Here we've got an upward strum, but we're not going to be tapping on that upward strum. We're only going to be tapping our foot on the beat. So when our foot hits the ground, that's going to be a down strum. The upward strum falls in between foot taps. If you just watch that one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Might help to think of your right hand and your foot as almost being connected together. So as your foot comes up, so does your right hand and your pick. As your foot goes down, so does your strumming hand. And then you can move on through the other strums. I think we had down, down, up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up, down. And you could try the down, down, up, down. This one might be a bit trickier to start with. Because there we're tapping our foot and we're not actually hitting the strings on a downward strum, so that might take a bit of getting used to. That down, down, up, tap, up, down, 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 up, tap, up, down. When you're comfortable with that, why not try changing chords whilst maintaining a steady foot tap? So we could choose a pair of chords and go smoothly between them with the foot tap. 2 and 3 and 4. Aiming to keep everything perfectly synchronized, no pauses or hesitations or wobbles in your foot tap as you're changing chords. And then you can always try playing one of the songs we've looked at with the foot tap. So try and get through an entire song whilst keeping that steady pulse. The foot tap is all about you developing your own internal sense of steadiness and timing. Another really good way to practice your timing would be to get a metronome, which is a mechanical device, or these days a digital device, that will give out a click or a beep at a given tempo, and you can then try and lock in time to that. So I have a few of my metronomes here now, which I'll just give you a look at. I suggest you get hold of one of these. If you're serious about working on your timing, it's a really good tool to have and to use. So the first one I've got is this kind of old school metronome. This is one of the tick-tock metronomes that you actually have to wind up, and it works like this. You've got a kind of pointer which you set going, it rocks from side to side like that, and then to speed it up or slow it down you just move this weight sort of further up the pointer and slows it down like that. I should point out that on all metronomes the actual tempos, or the tempi I think is the correct word, is marked in BPM, or beats per minute. So that's the sort of time scale on these things. So for instance, if you had 60 beats per minute like that, that's the same as a second, the same as the second hand on your watch. So that's the first type of metronome. Advantages of that, they look cool, I suppose. Certainly a lot cooler than the digital metronomes. Disadvantages of it, they're quite limited in terms of the different tempi that you can select. They only move up in 4 or 5 BPM increments, rather than being able to go to every single setting as you can on a digital metronome. So let's take a look at a more modern metronome. I've got this one here. This is just a Korg metronome, which I've had for ages. This is probably the kind of thing I'd recommend you go out and buy. They're very cheap and very versatile as well. It's got some more advanced features which you might make some use of as you sort of progress as a guitar player. But this one sounds like that. A bit more of an electronic-y kind of beep sound, and then you can just adjust the tempo up and down with a couple of selection buttons like so. So that's good. And the only disadvantage of this, and with a lot of cheaper metronomes, is that they're not very loud, which is important if you're trying to play along to a metronome. You don't want what you're playing on your guitar to drown out the metronome. So with something like this, it's got an earpiece socket, so you might want to plug in a pair of headphones just so it's nice and loud and you don't lose track of the beat. What else have I got? The ubiquitous smartphone, which can of course do it can do everything these days, but there are loads of metronome apps out there, most of which sort of work fairly well. So that would be a good option. And I mean, anything really. I mean, I quite often find myself using this, which is an old sort of 90s drum machine, which I will plug into a small guitar amp. The advantages of that is it's nice and loud, and I won't lose track of the beat, even if I'm playing noisy electric guitar or something like that. Let's move on to how to practice with a metronome. And you can really do the same kind of things as we were doing with the foot tap. So you can start off getting used to the metronome by doing some of our simple strumming patterns. So let me try and demonstrate with this. I'll just set this metronome going. It's set at 80 beats per minute, which is probably quite a nice, slowish starting tempo. And we can go through our strumming patterns. We just go 1, aim to get in sync with that metronome click, so you're hitting the strings exactly at the same time the metronome clicks. Then you can go through the other strums. Really trying to be objective, really trying to listen and see if you are actually in time. I think most beginners have a tendency to rush their timing slightly, so really try and listen out for that. And when you do find yourself straying from the beat, either just try and relax and come back into time, or if you lose it entirely, you can always stop the metronome and then restart it and try and get back in time again. One question you might have is, I'm using a metronome, do I need to tap my foot at the same time? And the answer is yes, you should be trying to tap your foot along as well, so everything is in sync, your foot tap and the metronome click and your strumming hand. I think that's a really good way to practice. As far as how often to use a metronome, I think you should probably be trying to do a little bit of work with a metronome each practice session. It's a really good thing to be working on. You don't want to be totally reliant on a metronome, otherwise you don't give yourself a chance to develop your own internal sense of timing and steadiness. So don't use it as a substitute for that, but use it in addition to the foot tapping work. Another really good thing about using a metronome is it's a good gauge of your progress. So you might start working on something like chord changing, for instance, at 60 beats per minute. And then each practice session you might push the metronome tempo up a little bit, maybe to 65 the next day, then up to 70, and just sort of measure your progress like that, and then you'll see over the course of a week or two how much quicker and better you get. If you're quite organised about practice, it's quite a good idea to keep a note of your metronome settings each practice session, then you've got a good record of your progress like that. If you're working on a song, you want to aim to play it at the tempo it is on the recording, but that might be quite a bit too fast for you at the beginning. So you could turn the metronome right down and work on it at a much slower tempo, and then gradually work up through the settings until you arrive at your goal. So, well, I think that's it. That's just about all I've got to say on the subject of foot tapping and metronomes. So good luck putting all of this stuff into practice, and I'll see you for another lesson very soon.